Well, it's the end of the 2024 year for Rethink Real Estate. So Chris and I are going to go through some numbers today, talk about how our business did by way of outreach, how we did from a content perspective, what we missed on, and why we really suffered and it hurt us in our viewership and our subscribers and everything that we got from a digital outreach perspective. We talk about our email strategy. We talk about how we've scaled the business up and how we look into the data side of it. Again, some real realizations around why maybe this year wasn't the greatest year that we've ever had, even though the marketplace softened and it should be a really good time from an auction perspective, just based on some individual things from a process perspective internally that we needed to figure out. Hopefully this helps. And thanks again for listening to Rethink Real Estate in 2024. Welcome to Rethink Real Estate. My name is Ben Brady, and this is a real estate podcast aimed to deliver sales strategies, marketing tips, and business insights from industry experts and myself to build a listing-focused business for the future. Let's get into it. Well, here we are. It's the end, Chris, of 2024.
It's the end of the world. No. As we know it.
Well, not necessarily, because this thing takes up a significant amount of time in order to do for you from an editing perspective. A lot of listening to me, mate, at night. Do you dream about me? Like, no, not in a weird way.
I do not dream about you. No. I do not. I don't. I have very vivid dreams, but I don't remember them pretty much 5 minutes after I wake up.
Oh, see. I know for a fact, like from a visualization perspective, if you're into that stuff, I know for the fact that what I watch or what I listen to or anything along those lines before I go to bed, I dream about. So if in fact I look at real estate before I go to bed, I'll dream about the type of house that I'm in or what I'm purchasing. If I watched the Ayrton Senna documentary before I went to bed last night, and all I dreamt about was racing. so that can be extremely unproductive. But again, you do quite a lot of editing in this podcast.
Yep. And my dreams seem to be very, I don't know, it's very like risk reward dreams. Like I'm like always like, I feel like I'm just sweating in my sleep. I'm like running in the middle of my dreams or like running from people. It's not nightmares, but I'm like definitely working in my sleep for some reason. So whatever that means to anybody who knows, feel free to reach out. I would love to understand why I dream like that. But yeah.
Let's not go down the path of psychoanalyzing Chris. It could take a little while. This has now changed the podcast. But let's talk about, I think it was a total of 148 episodes. I think this is the 148th, I think.
Not this year. I think we're going to be at 100. I can pull up the numbers right now.
Yeah, but let's talk like.
I think we're going to hit an even 100 this year. I think that was.
Was it? I thought. Yeah, okay, yeah, that makes sense. 2 a week for roughly 50 weeks a year, and then we had a couple of bonus episodes and everything in that. So let's talk about that from a perspective of anybody listening from a content side of things. Is that why are we trying to push out as much content as we possibly can?
Yeah, I think the big thing is just the attention on the internet is derived from the amount of consistency you have. So the more you can consistently put out content over and over and over, the more traction you'll get, the more the algorithms will actually push you up and show you to the people who enjoy watching your content or listening to your content or anything like that. The moment you kind of ghost on any platform right now, you just get thrown into the wind at that point. So it becomes very hard to catch up. And that is actually some stuff that we've seen this year for stuff that we've put on the back burner. It's very hard for us to catch up when it comes to views or numbers or anything like that from statistics, just because we haven't had the consistency that we probably both have wanted in 2024.
Well, let's talk about that for a moment, because I think that there's a part of this that, I want to talk about what went well, but let's start off with what didn't go well, because I think that we didn't execute on our short strategy as much as what we'd like to, considering the long format that we ultimately have. But that sort of stemmed down to a thing, Chris, that, there's this thing that we've tried to do within Harcourts Auctions is make you wear possibly 3.5 hats in one. And I think that that's probably a learning for us moving forward, is that we always knew it was going to be a very difficult task for you to take on all of that. But that being said, is that when it comes down to an agent trying to do their own content and manage it and do the ads and do all of that, like you've shown me that that's impossible.
Yeah, it's not impossible, but it is pretty pretty similar to what an agent has to do on a day-to-day basis, right? An agent is trying to sell homes, they're trying to procure new leads and new business, and then at the same time, they're trying to keep up their social media platforms so that it kind of has this organic outreach effect for them. And a lot of things get put on the back burner the moment business comes in. The moment we get busy, the little things start to slip. And when we all know that when any business goes awry, it's usually because of that stuff. So that was kind of the similar thing that happened to us. So a lot of our short form content, like you mentioned, got put on the back burner just based on time and based on the amount of effort that we wanted to focus on other areas of the business. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Like if you look at our YouTube numbers for the year, we had 1,800 watch time hours last year in 2023, and then we had 1,800 watch time hours in 2024. And so it didn't really matter in that sense. But if
Right.
you looked at views numbers and you looked at how many people were able to actually lay an impression on, it dropped significantly. So we had 125,000 views in 2023. A lot of that is short form content where they're consuming, 15 seconds, 20 seconds. Those numbers don't add up into the total watch time hours, but they actually add up into the amount of people that we're able to get in front of. So we only got in front of 35,000 people from a view perspective in 2024. So that's a huge drop from 125,000 to 35,000 just based on not executing that short form content like we wanted to in the previous year.
It's such a great learning though, because like at the moment, one of the things that in another part of our company that's separate to the auction business, we're changing all of our long format communication to the network to short format communication. One of the examples that I got given one time, it was it's a gentleman that I heard on a podcast. I believe the podcast is Prof G Markets, where Ed Ellison, the interviewer, was interviewing a gentleman. He was a producer in Hollywood for quite some time, but what he's done, he's gone and started up his own company in New York, where he's gotten funding to do just short format series. So, for example, they mainly target TikTok because TikTok gives you a longer element. I think you can do up to a 3-minute long short. Okay, whereas YouTube and also Instagram and Facebook are only 60 seconds, I believe, or 90 seconds.
Yeah, 60 to 90, depending on which platform.
Yep. And the funny thing is that they are like outdoing any of the major series or anything like that from a viewership perspective. So what that really spoke to me. So for example, one of their things is that they'll go and find a random dude on the street in New York City and say, "Are you a bachelor?" "Yes, I'm a bachelor." "Take me back to your apartment." They take them back to the apartment and they do a complete overhaul on that apartment within a short 3-minute episode. It's obviously cut up pretty dramatic. There's a long filming process, but then there's a series of that like that goes on for this is series 1 over 10 episodes and so on and so forth. So they are literally doing like Netflix series like the Ozarks in short format series with inside TikTok. And that seems to be the new trending, because one of the things that that they say on that episode is that, something ridiculous. I'm going to forget. I'm making up the number at the moment, but you can look it up. How often or how long the regular person spends scrolling through Netflix to find an actual show. The look time exceeds almost the watch time in a lot of cases for people. So it just goes to show that not executing on that short format content is actually harming from a viewership perspective, and that's the way that the entire world is going. But that being said, Chris, we're still not going to give up on long format. We need the long format in order to get the short format, correct?
No, and yeah, the long format one, it does produce a lot of our short form content for us specifically. So for us specifically, all these clips from our short form, the majority of our clips have come from these podcasts and stuff like that. And we still have a good base when it comes to our podcast from this standpoint. So we had about 30,000 podcast plays last year from all the platforms, of 30,000 plays of people listening and everything like that, which is great. That's that's over 2,000 a month, and that's everybody. We don't have the biggest demographic in the world of people looking for real estate podcasts and looking for real estate marketing and all that stuff. So 2,000 a month is perfectly fine for us.
Even more segregated to that is that then we segregate a portion of the real estate community that's not interested in non-distressed auction, because say 50% of our episodes are to that as well.
Exactly. So this year we had about 26,000 podcast plays as well. So you saw a slight dip. But that slight dip, again, comes from that traffic that we weren't able to build from the short form content. A lot of the traffic that we saw and a lot of new subscribers that we saw last year in 2023 was based on the short form content. When you look at where all the subscribers came from, when we looked at all the link clicks and how they got to the podcast, it came from that short form content. We had about 475 new subscribers last year to our podcast. We had about 350 this year. So It's a pretty significant drop off. But again, it's not the it shows you that there is still a base out there growing from our long form content, because a
Mm.
lot of the short form content got cut completely, and yet we were still able to grow pretty significantly on the year. Like, yeah, 2023 was a boom year for us, but now we've had a 2024. If that's our floor from just doing the long form, I think we can double down on that with the short form in 2025 and have even more success at that point.
And I think that from a strategy perspective, it's funny. It's like you have to still film long format, even if you're only publishing short format. To have
Yes.
something by way, to have something by way that is somewhat structured and credible and whatever it is. Like to film an entire episode of that short format series that I said, they're still having to film the entire experience and then take the good parts out of it.
100%. Yeah, they're just not publishing that full long form content for the viewers to see. We're kind of doing it where you get a bit behind the scenes look at our short form content if you wanted to get more information. So, well, we're kind of giving you the access to both, and that caters to two different types of audiences. Some people who might be driving in their car right now or on a workout or anything like that. We're catering to them right now on this long form podcast, but
Yep.
then we want to be able to reach them when they are doing that doom scrolling situation or that micro learning situation where they're going on Instagram, they're going on Facebook, and they're just kind of scrolling through stuff.
Now let's make a segue over to the podcast. Like in general, I know that YouTube is obviously like the podcast also, but I saw the viewership go up this year. I believe, right? Like we were getting not significantly more, but a lot more people listening. But when it says a lot more people listening, the thing that I notice is for how long they're listening for.
Yeah. So our numbers, our average time or our average duration went up this year, from a amount of time that people are listening to. Our podcast on the podcast actual side, where it's just audio, actually went down from a listener standpoint of people just using it from an audio standpoint. But that's because we actually transitioned a lot of people over to YouTube.
Got it.
So we actually split our demographic pretty heavily, where before it was about 25,000 people were listening just to the audio format, and then only 6,900 ish were going over to YouTube and watching it for the entire year. Now we've kind of 50-50 that. So we actually have more listeners now on YouTube than we do on our audio format. So we have 13,600 on YouTube, and we have 12,000 sitting over there on audio format. So yeah, it's just interesting that we've been able to pull them over to YouTube, because I think that's one, we've been able to pull them over to YouTube, but I also think two, there is more people finding us on YouTube, and that is becoming a bigger and bigger platform for people to be able to watch podcasts and stuff like that. So I think it's a little bit of a mixture.
Well, one of the things, one of our guests that was on a previous episode, a realtor in Florida, he had said like one of the things that he'd pulled his numbers from that was absolutely crazy is that he was getting 40% of his viewership from YouTube. However, that 40% was coming from smart TVs on YouTube.
Yes.
And that's something that I haven't discovered just yet. Like I love YouTube on my computer. I would never look at it on the TV because I don't think the app is as easy to use as say like YouTube TV, for example, is what I have as my main TV source. But it was just wild to see that, and it'll be interesting once our viewership starts ticking up and we start monitoring that number, how much is coming from smart TVs.
Yeah, and I could pull into those numbers in the future for everybody on the podcast too. I personally watch a lot of YouTube on my smart TVs, so that's just me. I'll just as easily go to the YouTube app as I will go over to Netflix app, depending on what mood I'm in at that day. I do want to dive into the numbers in a little bit from what we've done from an email perspective and an ads perspective as well.
Yep.
Just to kind of give people, I know we've talked a lot about ads in 2024 and a lot of the podcast episodes that we've been on, so I think it'd be good to give people a big insight of like what it's costing us per lead and everything like that. If you're down to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, let's go down that rabbit hole. But let's talk about what we do first of all for those that might be newer to the podcast or haven't heard an episode where Chris is explaining is that our demographic is agents that have listings on the marketplace that are not selling is essentially how we build a client base, but it's how we generate business. And the way that we outreach those parties is that we target them through social media if they've got a listing over a period of time. Okay, that we carry all of our own databases and everything along those lines that Chris is in control of, and then we also use that data to then reach out to them on several emails, just checking in on that specific listing to see whether or not we can then pitch them on the auction process that then they take it through to their sellers and then present that process as an opportunity to use our services rather than, say, a price reduction or taking it off the marketplace or so on and so forth. And we hope to build clients both in sellers and also agents through continued use of that. And we're talking about obviously the YouTube content of just using that from a resource perspective in order to then cut it up in short form and use it as ads. But now we're talking about the outreach program specifically to our clientele. So Chris, take us through that.
Yeah. So, and to a little bit of extent, just to add on to that demographic a little bit, it is properties over a certain price point that we are targeting
correct.
as well.
Yes,
So, while they're on the listing, they're on the market, everything like that. It is that they have to be over, $1.5 million and stuff like that. Certain price points in certain areas. So they have to actually be, considered luxury properties that we're trying to reach out to. So it is again a smaller demographic that we're going after. So in Facebook ads for the year, we actually had 280 leads that we've come in so far through the year. So we're recording this in the beginning of December. So there's still room that we'll probably grab about, maybe 30, 40, 50 more leads throughout the end of the year. But right now it's 280 leads, and the average cost of those leads right now are $79.91. So if you're thinking out there of how much it'll cost you to run leads, that is ours to get agents. Yours will be different to get buyers or sellers, but it could be cheaper, could be a little bit more expensive. But that is probably your baseline of like what you're trying to aim for this last year. So $79.
And I think to use that on a comparison or drawing a parallel, I think getting an agent to reach out just to hear a pitch on something is easier than getting a buyer to a seller to reach out about the value of their home or possibly selling in the near future or giving them some information about their property or the area sales. But then getting a buyer would be even easier through the social platforms if we looked at it from a tiered down perspective.
Yes. Yeah. Buyer leads are always going to be cheaper than seller leads. Agents, I would say, probably sit somewhere in the middle between those two, if I had to guess. So just in the past, when I tried to run seller leads, I was sitting about $120, $125 per lead. And then buyers were anywhere from $50 to $60 per lead.
Now, what do we define as a lead, mate? It's just a call to action on the social media platforms, or it comes inbound through to our website where the contact us form that then comes in?
So a lead directly from Facebook ads is coming directly on. We actually don't pull anybody off platform anymore from our Facebook lead standpoint. We do when they want more information, they can go and they can do clicks. We actually had 5,933 clicks to more information this year, which is about $3.77 per click, which is actually pretty good.
It's really good.
So we had people jumping over to our website to find more information. We don't, unless they actually type in Facebook when they do contact us form on the website, we don't count those as Facebook leads as of right now. So just talking about on platform Facebook leads, 280 leads, that's $79 per. We had 845,000 impressions from Facebook ads this year.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And that is to 40,000.
That's Meta. You mean Meta, the whole Meta suite,
Meta,
correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So Meta. So Facebook and Instagram is what Meta is made up of. That is out only to 40,000 agents, 40,960 agents. So we got in front of about 40,000 agents 21 times on average this year, which is about, it sounds like a giant number. Like, why would you try to get, 21 ads in front of these agents or make them see an ad 21 times? They only saw an ad 1.7 times a month on average. So
yeah, so that's enough to keep a reminder out there in the areas like again, I think that the commitment that we have to the social media element of things, which will be bigger into the future, is that like we have a tangible tracking. There's no question that we do, but that doesn't include the tangible stuff of them reaching out and coming directly to our website and Googling us or whatever it looks like. It's just 100%. Those. I don't think that you need to say, okay, yes, there's some immediate gratification in all of that, but then there's also when they see an email from us or they see another agent doing an auction or whatever those things, that it's that layering attribute. I do want to go back and just double click on something for a second, Chris. Yep. Before I forget, is that you'd mentioned something along the lines of just over 5,000 people that went directly to the website that clicked off platform, off the Meta Suite stuff. Is that I have to be very honest about something. You've helped us make it better, but our website is probably a little confusing because it's out of date. We're going through and we're trying to figure that out at the moment a little bit better, and that's definitely a project for us very early next year. But the reality is our website doesn't have a serious call to action in any way, shape, or form. I think that it's probably a little confusing from a process perspective, and that just goes to show is that we're getting the people to click through. It's on us in order to sort of tweak the content within the website to make it more appealing and more inviting to people in order to get more execution on that. But that's a good problem to have, I would say, correct?
Yeah, it's a good problem to have. Obviously, we're getting people there. I would say also the biggest limitation with our website right now is the mobile friendliness of our
correct.
website right now.
Correct.
We have been, trying to figure that out and try to put a Band-Aid on it this year by creating landing pages and stuff like that through HubSpot, who is our CRM. So we've done a lot of work from that standpoint of trying to still make the traffic land on a page that gives them a little bit more information, but it's still not perfect. And I think that is what Ben's kind of tailing to. There's a lot more opportunity to take those in and create, more high intent leads from that standpoint. I do want to give a one little quarter snapshot of these Facebook ads and kind of show what people could expect if they're trying to run these ads out there.
Which again, I do want to double click on. We only did this for 6 months of the year, mate.
Yeah, it wasn't the full year.
So 280 for 6 months of the year.
Yeah, I mean, it might be a little bit more than 6 months. It might be, I think, 8 months.
Okay.
But somewhere around there. So for one quarter that is already kind of closed, like we've gotten everything that we could out of those leads and everything that have come in. We had 110 leads come in through one quarter. So that's about $80 per lead is what I drew up from that quarter. What we call really good leads. So that's leads. What I would classify leads that come in is anybody who gives us first name, last name, email address, phone number, and the right to contact them. That is a lead for us, and that happens on platform on Meta. So that's on Facebook or Instagram. They're not going anywhere else, and they're just putting it in there. That's about $80 per lead for those guys, for those agents that are reaching out to us at that point. We had 10 heroes come through, and what we call heroes are high intent revenue opportunities. Those are people who are really curious or really into what we're doing, and they're really they're high intent. We're probably going to get them. Those are the ones that the sales team have reached out to. We probably met with their seller. Ben's probably met with them. Like, those are 10 heroes that have come through. That's $880 per hero lead that came in through that quarter. So we're most likely going to get those ones across the board. So we actually had 9 listings come from those 10 hero leads. That shows our conversion rate from that standpoint. So once Ben gets on the phone with them, and once they get them through, and once we get the seller on board, that's showing that we're converting at about a 90% rate once we get the sellers on the phone call.
And just to give some, happy to share the numbers, is our average sale price at the moment is a little over $2 million. So call it the average fee on each one of those would be around $20,000. We'll just use that. Yep. Okay, so $20,000 per 9 listings with a success rate last quarter, depending on the new areas and the style of the property and whatever it may be. Let's just round it out at say 70% worst case scenario. That's an incredible ROI.
Yeah, so it's $977 per listing that we brought in from Facebook just for that one quarter alone in that standpoint. So, we'd spend that $977 all day to get a listing.
All day.
Yeah, all day. And to be able to help. And so that was really good from a Facebook ad standpoint. I do want to kind of transition into the emails quickly so I can kind of walk you through that. So this year and I'm going to use the same terminology from a hero lead at the end of this, just to give you kind of a basis of that's $900 per hero lead, $977 for Facebook. And then just keep that in mind for once we get to the end of emails. So in emails, I do want to kind of put in our costs, because everybody does think emails are free when it comes to that. We do pay for a CRM. We do pay for, trying to find emails and trying to enhance and scrub our, database and everything like that, and working on our database. So we spent about $8,000 this year on our CRM and email platform. So that's total.
Now let's just make sure that people understand. There's obviously the thing that we're not including is you and the sales team and 100%. Me and all of that type of stuff. But
yeah, we're not including staff costs in this. This is just kind of technology fees at this point, or from an ads perspective, how much money we actually paid to Meta. So that's $8,000 without staff fees. Obviously you can do the math and everything like that later if you want to find out your true ROI on that standpoint. But we sent out about 86,000 emails this year. So 86,360 emails that we sent out to 41,052 agents. So about the same number of agents reached that we did on Facebook. Mm-hmm. So about the same amount of total and everything like that. We obviously had way more impressions on Facebook, but we had way better, read rates and everything like that here on email on emails. So we had 40% open rate on our emails for 86,000 emails, which is actually pretty good.
Mate, I think that from an industry standard perspective, I think that you could go across all industries. I don't know that there'd be any better ones than 40%.
Yeah. I mean, if you're doing very small numbers and you're very, you're maybe sending out 30 emails a week or something, you're obviously going to get a much better open rate because you're sending it exactly to the people that you want to send to and everything like that. We are sending this at a pretty large scale. That is a lot of emails a month. It's verging on the spammy area, which it happens, but
which again, you've had some complications towards the end of this year as well that we've
yes.
obviously had to go through with all of the domains and
Yes.
everything along those lines. This does not, everybody thinks that they can just do this on a very consistent basis. The one thing that I think, like, you've gotten this as consistent as you possibly can be, but the one thing that I've realized is there is an inconsistency that we have to get used to as well, based on all of the little hurdles that we have to jump through.
And we're working on making this more consistent. We'll probably do a future podcast on how we can make, this consistent for if you want to do cold calls and cold emails and everything like that. Like it is a kind of an art form of trying to get around things and everything like that. And a lot of your internal hurdles as well. So a lot of our complications came from internal processes and stuff like that. So we had about 3,500 replies, which is a 4% reply rate for the emails that we sent out this year. So again, good solid number. We had a 0.1% unsubscribe rate, which is kind of where you want to sit in. You want to we it's funny because Ben's been kind of shocked at that. We see all the unsubscribes kind of come in and it almost feels like they're always flooding you when in reality they're not. Like they're really not at that point. We had 2,752 phone calls derived from this. So that's straight to our sales team, and that's Ben and everything like that. That is 2,752 phone calls derived from these emails. That's a lot. That's a lot of phone calls for the guys and everything like that.
Well, I think that the execution rate on that would be in excess of 70%. Like once we have them on the phone, is that then once they're on the phone to the actual conversion of getting that opportunity to then be in front of the seller and getting that listing, I think would be pretty much across the board relatively even. There's not a great deal of slippage.
Yeah, so we have a couple different phone calls in our process and a way we kind of reach out to people, and a lot of those are just trying to introduce ourselves, and so those ones wouldn't have the same conversion rate that the later ones in the days on market have. So we had about 121 hero leads come from emails this year. And that is $66 per hero lead. So we had $977 per high intent revenue opportunity leads from Facebook's, and then we had $66 per hero lead coming from emails. If you take into account our technology fees and everything that we pay from that standpoint, that's obviously much more cheaper, much more cost effective. It's just how can we scale that?
I think that, but then if we added in the wages and everything along those lines, I think they're gonna be very expensive in that sense, because I think that people would take for granted the management, the data that you go through, and the team that we have to have that. But that being said, is that if you break it down, if you're an agent, that's nothing. You don't have to have the teams. You don't have to have the 40,000 people in the database. You don't have to have any of that stuff. Like if you broke it down to 1,000 people from a manageable perspective, and you wanted to try and get 70 deals or hero leads out of your people in any way, shape, or form for the year, is that's quite easy.
Yeah, it would be much easier than what we're trying to do. So we're actually culling through over 1 million contacts in our database. And so we obviously have to have a CRM level high enough to pay for that, which is where the $8,000 comes from, because we are actually culling through over 1 million people to try and find the people who are in the right price point, right days on market, right locations, areas, everything like that. So we're pulling in a lot of information.
So we basically have 1 million people that we're constantly sort of feeding in, feeding out. But then out of that, our identification of our client is a 40,000 of 1 million, roughly.
We can reach more. That's kind of where we've been capped at from an email standpoint, and just kind of our own processes and stuff like that. So that's hopefully our 2025 goal is just being able to scale and get in front of more and more agents who need our help. That's where we're hitting our bottleneck right now.
Yep. Okay. Well, I think that that gives everybody a bit of a snapshot of what the years look like for us. At the end of the day, we've got the podcast element side of it. We've got the targeting through the Facebook and the social media platforms, and then not to mention as well, we've got then the email side of it. I think that there's a part of this that I think that we're doing very well at the moment is talking about the internal issues that we have had in trying to grow. I think that it's not, and a lot of people think it's staffing. I don't think that it's staffing. I think that it's just the trying to challenge the new areas of finding out what works in the system and processes that we have in all of these avenues in order to grow the business from that perspective, as well as managing the existing client database as well. Like it's one of those things that from a scale perspective, it also speaks to me in the sense of how efficient you can be with your own real estate model within a small marketplace. You might think that it's restricting that you only have X number of people that live locally, okay, but I think that you need to see that as an unbelievable benefit because, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong here, is the scalable element of what we're doing is the most difficult thing.
Yes, for us specifically, we're trying to. If you think about it, there are 1.5 million active realtors in the United States. We're trying to reach the majority of those, or at least a good portion of those. We're reaching
The
about
ones that are constantly doing business.
Yes,
Yeah.
we're reaching 40,000. There are over 100,000 brokerages in the entire United States. We haven't even reached that number yet. So, and we ideally would reach every single brokerage. They know about us, and they know us as a service from that standpoint. I also think the big thing is people always think growth is linear, like it's always going to go up. And I think it's because we've watched TV shows, we've seen stock prices, everything like that. Growth is not linear. So some years we have to take a step back to understand our processes a little bit better and try to get smarter when it comes to the scale. And I think that's what we're trying to do right now and trying to make 2025 obviously our best year yet.
Well, team, thanks so much for your loyalty and those that are listening in on a regular basis. Christopher, thank you. It's always great sharing the podcast room with you. So here's the 2025. So about 75% of our audience hasn't liked, followed, or subscribed to our podcast. It would mean the world to us, and it would help this podcast more than you know to expand our reach if you were to like, follow, or subscribe on any of the platforms that you're watching or listening on. Thanks again.